Hey filmmakers, today I'm going to show you how to take an ugly location that you may be stuck shooting for whatever reason and turn it into something that can look a lot better. There are a handful of things that you can do to make a location look better, and I'm going to break them down nice and simple in this video. We're also going to talk about how lens selection can either make or break your scene. Choose the right lens and it could look awesome. Choose the wrong lens and it could look like literal garbage.
Could be better.
So I'm going to give you a full review of the brand new Viltrox 85mm F1.8 lens and see how this thing shoots some B-roll. Step one in this whole process is absolutely the easiest. Check out some different angles because we've already determined that you can't shoot at a different location, so let's at least find the best angle possible there. Step number two is to get some distance between your subject and the background. And sorry, my handwriting is terrible. If your subject is right up against that ugly wall or building or whatever it is, there's definitely no way you're gonna be able to blur that out and keep the viewer's eye focused on the subject. Number three, and this might actually come even before number one, and that could be time of day. So if you have to shoot in that ugly location because it's what the client chose, or it just happens to be where the event is taking place, try to select the best time of day possible, which, as you know, is gonna be golden hour or sunrise, sunset. Number four is your lens selection, and I highly recommend using a 85mm or above. Once you get to 85mm, you're getting a ton of compression and it allows that background to blur out and become very soft. If you don't have an 85mm lens, you can get away with it a lot of times with a 50mm lens as well. Now, a second part to lens selection is your f-stop. If you're shooting at like f5.6, f8, 11, 16, any of those, everything's gonna be in focus and you're really gonna be able to see that ugly background way too much. So ideally, open up as much as you can on that lens. So for all the example shots that I did in this video, we were at f1.8, which is really wide open. It's a fantastic lens, lets in a ton of light. Now, of course, with that sort of wide open aperture, your depth of field is going to be really shallow. So you need to keep that in mind. If your subject is doing a ton of moving, f1.8 might be a little bit too shallow. You definitely don't want them to go blurry and in and out of focus too much. Now, I don't always recommend shooting wide open f1.8 or 2 or 2.8, whatever it is. It just depends on your scenario and if the scene calls for that. Not every scene can be wide open with a super blurred out background. I get that. Obviously it looks beautiful and gorgeous, but not every video is going to be able to do that. Part three of using the right lens for your scene is also adding ND filters. So if you're shooting out in bright sunny daylight and you're opening your lens up all the way, you're definitely going to need ND filters. Number five of this is distance between the camera and your subject. You want to be as close to your subject as possible so that you can be shooting more on the macro side of the lens, allowing the background to blur out. If you shoot with an 85mm lens or say a 70 to 200mm lens, but you still focus it all the way to infinity because you're too far away from your subject, well, your subject will be in focus and the background, and that defeats the whole point of it. So try to get the camera up as close to your subject as possible while still keeping them in frame without cutting off too many of the important things that need to be in the frame. This is different than step two, which was your distance between the subject and the background. So you want to keep your subject off of that ugly background, give them at least 10 feet, and then you want to get as close to your subject as possible. You don't want to be too far back because then you'll be focusing closer to infinity, which will make your subject and background almost on the same focal plane. You can take an ugly location and make it look much better just simply by getting it blurred out and turn it into a nice creamy bokeh fest instead of a garbage fire. But it also takes a good lens to do that. So I want to talk to you guys more about the Viltrox 85mm lens because this thing is actually a bokeh beast. this lens, I'm gonna pop it off, actually is a full frame lens that will also work on crop sensor APS-C lenses. There is a ton of glass, and this front entrance pupil is actually a huge part in what causes that beautiful blurred out bokeh. The actual build quality of this lens is extremely solid. I'd say it's probably the most solid lens that I actually own. It has a full metal body construction, which is really impressive because I also have this Rokinon Cine DS 85mm lens, and it's completely made of plastic. The whole body, the casing, the gears, everything on it is plastic. There's really no metal except on the mount. This lens is $399 right now, whereas the Rokinon, similar to that, is $389, a little bit cheaper, but it's full plastic. And the Sony 85mm lens, which is an f1.8 and also a full metal build, is $550. So this is definitely a steal when it comes to a full metal construction 85mm lens. It comes with a standard little lens hood, which of course is nice to prevent those lens flares when you really don't want them. And of course it has a standard lens cap, which I find was kind of a nice quality too. It doesn't pop off like some other lens caps I find pop off in the case. This one stays on. I can't actually get it to pop off like that. You gotta squeeze it to get it to really come off. I'm not gonna get technical and shoot charts and all that kind of stuff in my review of this lens, but I'll leave a link in the description below so you can check out some more details on it. Let's talk about a couple things that I found interesting with this lens. So it is an autofocus lens, and it has all of the electronic connections here. So you can't actually manually change your aperture like you can on one of the Rokinon Cine DS lenses. You have to control it with the camera, which is fine, and I can definitely do that. Now, when pulling focus with this lens, it's actually really smooth and nice to do. I absolutely love the focus ring on this lens. It actually has a really great throw to it. There are no hard stops, which I actually prefer on lenses so that I can know when I go to infinity or when I'm at my minimum focus distance. This one will actually just spin forever. And I found myself pulling focus manually with this lens almost every time, because one con that I did find with it, at least with my use, is that the autofocus wasn't great or very usable, at least for me. When I had it on the Sony a6500, which for me is the camera with the best autofocus that I have, it really did a lot of hunting, and when I threw it on my Sony a7S, the autofocus was absolutely unusable. But I have seen some other reviews of this lens on different cameras where the autofocus worked really nicely, so it might just be me and my cameras that I'm using. When using this lens, I really didn't see any vignetting when I was using it on a full frame lens or on APS-C. Now let's talk about crop sensors, because once you get this thing onto a crop sensor lens, it's pretty much the equivalent of a 136mm lens. It's not very often that I'm shooting with a 135mm lens unless I'm doing an event or I'm trying to shoot something really far away, and then I'm usually using a 70x200mm lens. So I definitely prefer using this lens on a full frame sensor like my Sony a7S. The lens doesn't have any optical image stabilization, so if you rely on something like that, you're definitely going to need to get it from the camera side. It's very tack sharp. I haven't had any issues with it being soft, and it has a great minimum focus distance of 2.6 feet, so you can get really close up on your subject. Stop. Something that I look for in a good quality lens is how it actually does its focusing, and this one is all done internally, so that means when I'm focusing, this front lens element isn't moving in or out or spinning or rotating at all, which is great because it'll work really nicely with the matte box or variable ND filters because it's all happening internally inside the lens. In my opinion, for the money, this lens definitely has a really nice metal build quality, beautiful glass elements, and a gorgeous blurred out bokeh that can do a fantastic job of hiding those ugly backgrounds. I want to say a special thanks to the guys over at Viltrox for sending this lens out for review. It's been a ton of fun to play with, and I'm definitely interested to see what they do in the future with hopefully more focal lengths. And guys, if you want to see more videos like this, hit subscribe right now because I have a ton more videos coming out on shooting, editing, everything like that. All right, I'll see you in the next video.